explore top books on leadership, business, and personal growth to help doctors and practice owners build thriving practices and hopefully fulfilling careers. I'm Kyle Clutie, joined by my co-host, Dr. Brianna Rue and Dr. Aaron Warner. Each month, we break down an inspiring book, challenge each other with fresh ideas, and share actionable insights to help you lead better, work smarter, and hopefully live well. So I'm going to dive right into it with our book here. We've got, before I even turn it over to both of you, but we've got a pretty amazing book. I've got it on the on the screen here. If you're listening, sorry you can't see it, but we've both got it up. How the Mighty Fall and Why Some Companies Never Give In by Jim Collins. So we did, was it last time that we did Beyond Entrepreneurship with Jim Collins? That was last time, right?
No, it was two times ago.
Two times ago. Okay. That's right. So this is another gem from Jim Collins. Honestly, my first thoughts on it are, as we text back and forth for the last month as we're reading this book, is that this could easily be in my top 5 or 10 reads in terms of business reads, just because you could just go through my pages and see all the stars and all the underlined paragraphs, basically entire pages that were underlined. Is just really, really good. I'll wait with the quote here until Aaron jumps on. But what were your first impressions, Brianna?
I like how he kind of prefaced it, because nobody, I think, realizing that success leads clues, failure leads clues. And he said in the beginning, he's like, it's not fun to see companies fail. That's not what this is, because it can get very morbid. But in learning the lessons, when he was trying to put it all together and asked his wife, how do I put all this together? And her comeback was a book that she read, which was saying, all families that are happy kind of for the same reasons, but all families that are not happy all have their own reasons. But look for the commonality, and that's where all of this data and research came together. And what was really cool is he didn't look at any present interviews. This was all from research in the time being. Mm-hmm. And that's where all this came out, because if you look back, you always can color it. I mean, we're all positive people on here. You can color it positively.
Yeah.
And he didn't allow that to really happen.
For sure. I think one of the things that, as we set up talking about this book together, one of the things that for our listeners, just to kind of encapsulate it, obviously the book is called How the Mighty Fall, but this is, Jim Collins is the guy that wrote the books for great companies, right? He's the good to great guy. So he's the guy that knows how companies make that inflection point from good to great. And this information is, what is he seeing that is kind of the hallmark, or what happens within those great companies, or those good or great companies, that actually they succumb to themselves. They fall from grace. They become less successful. Sometimes they end up in bankruptcy. So he's got plenty of examples in there, example after example. And this is it was written about I think right at the end of the financial crisis in 2008, I think 2009, 2010. So just think, as you're listening to us talk about this, and as you read this book, what are some similarities? And this is why it's so impactful for me, is what are some similarities that I see in myself, that I see in my own practice, in my own leadership, in my own, all those things, all the management skills that I'm seeing in some of these 5 stages of decline. So that's I think it's a good way to set it up. But how I really wanted to start it out, because this is such an impactful part. Page 123, I'm going to go to the end. We're going to start at the end. And this is, I've got 5 stars next to this part of my book. So 5. Really, really good. 5 stars. Lots of
That's the most stars we've ever had from you, Kyle.
I think so. It's huge. I have to give it a double thumbs up here, but I'll spare you the fireworks. But it says, never give in. Be willing to change tactics, but never give up your core purpose. Be willing to kill failed business ideas, even to shutter big operations you've been in for a long time, but never give up on the idea of building a great company. Be willing to evolve into an entirely different portfolio of activities, even to the point of zero overlap with what you do today, but never give up on the principles that define your culture. Be willing to embrace the inevitability of creative destruction, but never give up on the discipline to create your own future. Be willing to embrace loss, to endure pain, to temporarily lose freedoms, but never give up faith in the ability to prevail. Be willing to form alliances with former adversaries, to accept necessary compromise, but never, ever give up on your core values. I just thought that was phenomenal. So,
Do we just stop there?
mic drop, end of podcast. See you
I
next
agree.
month.
Well, I had a 1 star, but I had the paper dog-eared, so that's
Oh, that's
my other.
that's like
other
2
4.
more stars.
That's 2
And
more.
I had it too.
Yeah.
But I had more of the top part.
Nice. You didn't even underline. You just circled it.
I like it. I also want Kyle to just read books for me so I can play them. So it's funny, Kyle. You started at the end because the first thing that jumped out of me was on page 1,
Okay.
and at the very end of that, he talks about his mentor Bill Lazier. He said, Bill Lazier told me about effective teaching. Don't try to come up with the right answers. Focus on coming up with good questions.
Mm.
And that for me really carried throughout the whole book on just instead of trying to be right, just asking the right questions. Because as we go through and talk about probably the 5 stages of decline, right? It's that they all to me kind of said, hey, we stopped asking questions, right?
That's
and
great.
we stopped being curious. We started just either knowing or trying to know the right answer.
Yeah, so to preface too, like how he came up with this book, he was invited to speak to at West Point, and a guy in the audience was asking, how would you know when your company has declined? We're in this phase where it's hunky-dory and everything's going well, and that's the question that prefaced the book. And so he went through things like Bank of America, Rubbermaid, and the stories in here are really amazing, kind of how they got to that good to great, but then really where they went through those 5 stages. So as we talk about the 5 stages of decline, so you have stage 1, which is hubris born of success. So remember, as we go through these, all of these stages can be avoided by discipline. What I took away from here, this is my note I wrote. By discipline, knowing your numbers, staying true to your purpose and your core values, and remember who you are serving, and keep evolving with clarity, not to just follow the followers. And I know Aaron's going to go down this route of like IPL and RF and like this part, and I can probably go off on a myopia management tangent and the dry eye, but I think there's some really good questions that we can ask there. The second stage is your undisciplined pursuit of more, and that comes from overreaching. So it's maybe adding, like, I know hearing has been coming up a lot, adding hearing to optometry. But if we're not plugging the holes or like the things that's hitting, he calls it the water line below the boat, you can fix stuff above the water line, but you can't fix stuff below the water line if you get hit. So if you're overreaching, but you're not fixing your capture rate, and you know it's 70%, like none of us are 70% people on here, so that the industry has put us to sleep thinking 70% is fine. We're not asking the right questions. If the patient asks for their PD, it's not the moment for you to charge them for their PD. Figure out why it happened so it doesn't happen again. Like that's what we're talking is like the better questions. Then you have stage 3, which is the denial of risk and peril. So you explain away bad numbers and you just kind of put on these rose-colored glasses. Then you're grasping for salvation. So that's probably where you've given up a little bit. A new CEO tends to come in. Mm-hmm. They still make all these changes. So this is not companies that quit evolving, is not what actually they studied either. And then you have when you get to stage 4, you either go back up and you come out of decline. So he went through some companies that did that right at the end. And stage 5 is they're out of cash. So that's when you become irrelevant or you slowly die. Like our Meibomian gland.
Yeah, great summary there.
Everybody blink.
let's jump into the first one then. Just take them one by one. So hubris born of success. So what were your takeaways there? And then where do you see it? Like, do you see this in yourself? Because I do. I see it in myself. I see it in things I'm doing. I see it in our profession. But yeah, what do you guys think?
Aaron, you want to go first?
I think it's the here's where he introduces well, in this book, the flywheel concept, and I've dog-eared and circled on page 35 at the top of the book the where the first paragraph where it talk about to disrespect the potential remaining in your primary flywheel or to neglect the flywheel out of boredom, and here's where Brun has already heard my rant because I'm very pro IPL. I'm pro all those things, but I'm not pro those when it takes you away from your focus. And anything you do should add to your your flywheel. It should add to what you offer, what you do, not distract you from it. It should enhance it. And from a different analogy, if I'm looking for a cake, I'm not going to go to my corner taco guy, right? He does tacos well. Maybe he'll branch off into burritos, right? Maybe he'll throw some tahini sauce in there and mix it around, but he knows what he does. He's not going to start making birthday cakes. And so I think that sometimes in optometry, and I know I'm guilty of it, I kind of get bored doing what I do, which is primary care. And so I say, oh, well, here's a new drug I'm going to chase after. Here's a new piece of equipment that is going to light a fire back under me. But when it's not done properly, it becomes a burden as opposed to an enhancement. But when it is done properly, it just seamlessly integrates into the flow that we already have. And so I think that's the big takeaway out of that. The first one is, the ego of, hey, I did the first thing well, I can do anything well, as opposed to humbling yourself and saying, hey, I'm doing this really well. How can I just slowly enhance it?
I like those words you used. The one, boredom, right? Guys, we get what you do is hard. We do it too. I mean, how many times can you count to the number 2 and not want something more? So we're not saying that it's that. My takeaways here, I had 3. One was to continually ask yourself the hard questions of both yourself and your team and getting them behind you. The other one is your business, in order for it to not, don't fall into the trap of continued success. So you're never guaranteed continued success. So when I come back, I kind of hinted it there, where we're neglecting these 30% of patients that are asking for copies of their prescription, but we've never asked the hard questions. Why are they leaving? We're not willing to plug the hole and figure out where the handoff went wrong. Do we not have the products? Was it something that we said? Is there better language that we could use? We're just so fast of on to the next syndrome. And the learning versus knowing person. So continually learning, and that's who I've really started to surround myself with, obviously here, is just continually being a student. You're not done when you take the test. That's when the test starts. And understanding the why behind your current success. So in here, he talks a lot about what you do with luck. And when you depend more on the circumstances going right and going well, that the people that were successful underestimated that, maybe I'm saying it backwards, but then the people that failed, it's not just your talent.
Right.
I don't know, Kyle, if you can speak to that a little bit more, because that part really, people really think they're really, really good.
Right.
When years.
Or they are if they don't, basically people don't know what they don't know, and I think that when you know what you don't know, you're in a much more humble position to be open to learning, to be open to continuously renewing. I think the Aaron, I underlined that same spot, page 35, up at the top. He says later on in that little paragraph, he says, exit definitively or renew obsessively. I love that. Like Jim Collins is an incredible teacher and writer, but that's like two great phrases there. Exit definitively or renew obsessively. Where that hit me was like, clearly we have our practices and we enjoy those things, but we also have other endeavors that we're striving towards. I'm trying to build consulting and coaching and doing things beyond my two locations. And sometimes I feel like I know this, but this chapter really hit hard for me is if I were, not that I'm going to take away creative energy in other endeavors, but if I were to apply as much creative energy as I do towards, things like building protocols, doing some, building a lecture, creating content for LinkedIn, writing articles, like that, not that I shouldn't do that, but that creative energy takes energy, right? And if that was channeled and funneled back into, increasing my capture rate, like you're talking about, Brianna, just thinking about some of the defined details of my practice, think where I could be with the practice as well. So it's easy for me to just be like, well, I can do it all. I can do it all because I want to, and I'm excited about it. But the reality is it does kind of, that can, kind of separate the things that we're doing and kind of make us feel a little bit disparate. The other thing that
Did you just become an essentialist?
Probably, yeah. It's that last 21 days. But the other thing too for me is I think the hubris born of success, I've seen it in practices where a lot of, especially like a lot, I think it happens a lot in the professional field. You don't have to be an OD to do this. You can probably be an MD or any sort of professional, is because you're successful at being a really good clinician, you think that you are also a very good manager. You think that you're also a good entrepreneur. You think that you're also really good at this. It's like, and so that just, hey, I'm good at this, so why couldn't I be good at that? So it's really just born of hubris. And it's pride really that that inflates and then it turns into what I've seen in practices is just not healthy cultures and doctors that are making way too many decisions and disempowered staff, those things.
Yeah, I put next to in that same paragraph. Well, actually earlier, I on page 20 or 32, I underlined where it says a core business that meets a fundamental human need. And one at which you become the best in the world rarely becomes obsolete. So I think iCare easily falls into that. But going back to the primary flywheel and secondaries, I had a conversation with Dave Kading on this, and we kind of settled on and mutually agreed that, the primary flywheel of primary care, comprehensive eye exams, annual routine exams, is probably 70 to 80% of your time in clinic. That the specialty is 20 to 30, and I think outlining that, at least for me, helped to say, oh, okay, now I know where I'm at. I don't feel like I'm underperforming because I'm not doing it 100% of the time, right? I'm only doing it, 2 out of every 10 patients, which is success, because now I've redefined what success looks like. So I think evaluating how much time you put into each of those systems, which was part of the 21-day challenge of essentialism, was looking at time, right? But understanding what to set the expectations. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up, and we've kind of hit on it, but I like how he puts it at the very end of this chapter, the what replaces the why. He says, there's a difference between we're successful because we do these things versus we're successful because we understand why we do these specific things and under what conditions. And so there's one thing to say, well, this is how it's always been, it's how it's always worked, I'm going to keep doing it, which is going to run us into trouble, as opposed to this is why we do what we do. And now we know how to adjust accordingly because we understand the principles behind the action.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Aaron, we had that conversation a couple weeks ago when we were talking on the phone. You brought that up, and I hadn't got to that spot yet. And I think that was definitely an impactful place for me too.
And it's also realizing, guys, there's a lot of competition. So where do you want to sit? Don't just sit back and don't think that's going to get bigger. It's only going to get bigger. It's only going to get badder. So I even saw this in the practice that I joined and ended up purchasing. AMP, he says, literally it died because its customers died. They didn't renew it. And so you see these practices, if you don't bring in a new associate, and you don't bring in new blood, and you don't bring in new people, your practice does go into that decline. That's the kind of practice I went into. I mean, it was so over leveraged in the Medicare because he just aged with his patients. So if you do not work to get families in and renew that new patient, so if you look at one number and only one number, because there's so many KPIs, maybe Kyle will look at a different one, it is your new patient ratio. The sweet spot, if your practice is literally dying, if you're at 11 to 12%, you're coasting if your new patients is about 14 to 15% of your exam schedules, and you're growing at 22 to 24% is really the stat. If you are over that, it means you have a really leaky bucket. That's why you see so many of these entities have to advertise and advertise and advertise. We are fortunate that we don't have to do that. So realize that your phone rings because you do a good job. And in one of the books, the Beyond Entrepreneurship said, it says, when you do good work, it creates more work. That's the point. So
those are good numbers.
I love that,
Wrote
Aaron,
those
that
down.
emphasis on the primary care flywheel.
Oh, wow. Well, I think that's a good lead into the next stage, which is that undisciplined pursuit of more. Right? When we get bored of that first flywheel and say, now I'm going to become a dry eye expert, or I'm going to become a myopia management expert, and I'm going to show up at a conference and buy all the toys I need because I can't be an expert without having the toys. And I'm being a little facetious here, but that I get bored seeing comprehensive exams, or I listen to somebody who says I don't see comprehensive exams anymore. I only do my specialty, which I think is BS. I think there's very few speakers that truly live that life, but it's that hey, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? And that gets us in a lot more than just cash flow trouble.
Kyle, we were speaking, you also mentioned a question that you came about with culture. I think this leads into it, is if you walked in, I'll let you start, the question that you asked.
Oh, yeah.
Tell the story.
Yeah. So I was, Chris Wolf and we were running together one morning a couple of weeks ago, and we were just talking about culture and like, how do we measure culture? Like if you were to come up with a KPI. Is there a KPI to measure culture? There probably is. I just don't know about it yet. But how would you know that? And the thing that I came up with or thought of in that moment that I relayed at a recent meeting when I was teaching on that topic was like, if I were to walk into your practice, all of your practices, and I were to ask every single staff member, every single team member at your practice one question, and that would be, what's most important now? How many different answers would I get? And so my thought was, and I think it's getting at the heart of it. You're getting at the heart of back what we talked about in the last month, 21 days of essentialism, all those types of things. But I think that the more, or what I've arrived at, is the more answers we would get, the more answers I would get, probably that would be basically indirectly correlated with the health of the practice, the organizational health of the practice and how good the culture really is. Because I think the fewer answers you get, like if everybody seems to be aligned on what's most important right now, ideally it would be, oh, we're working on this right now. Like actually Q2, Q3, we're starting this, for the next 2 to 3 months. This is the main endeavor beyond our day-to-day kind of whirlwind. This is what we're trying to improve the practice. Because I think if you have that sort of alignment with everybody, like that means that they're all aware, you've clarified things really well, you've communicated things really well, and then everybody has a pretty well-constructed description on exactly how they can win in that situation. So, but yeah, I think it definitely pertains to this undisciplined pursuit more because I'm guilty. The reason I've come up with that for myself is because the first like 3 to 4 years of running my practice, like I overextended myself trying to push my practice to greater revenues through leveraging using debt to, I'll be honest with you, just like I was the guy that just continued to add equipment, add equipment, add equipment. And it's worked out because I know how to use it and get patients through it um, funnel patients out of primary care into those areas. But that was really undisciplined, and I've had since to like retract that and tried to steer the ship a different way. Um, but that's in my team, I lost some teammates, staff members, because I think basically because I just wasn't as clear as I should be, and I constantly kept changing. Hey, I'm going to get this. It'd be 1 month we're going to start this. Next month we're going to start this. Next month we're going to start this. And I had to pull back and just say, nope, we're just going to focus on like one or two things. That's
It
it.
was also a critical piece to learn from this, because I do a lot of cold calling, obviously for Dr. Contact Lens, to try to get doctors on demos and get them out of their own way. Guys, look at your phone calls, please. Like how your team is answering the phone. So many times they're like, hello, West Broward Eye Care. Does that sound like someone wants to do business with you? Like you need to know at that point that I was a sales rep. I never say that it's Dr. Rue. I'm always Brianna in that moment because I never want to use that to get past a gatekeeper. But we have 8 gatekeepers that are not helping us. So when I finally get to a manager, I say, okay, well, who would I do a demo with? And they're like, oh, that's Dr. Clutie. Well, when does he do demos? Well, I don't know. But you're the manager of the schedule. So how do you keep innovating? Right? And so it's not just that pursuit of more. It's getting the people around you to also support those endeavors in going to meetings, in taking demos, because I don't know their job anymore. So
Yeah,
the
I think.
piece of this, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there, to wrap it up into what he's really meaning here, is I forget where he says it, but I reread this section. I forget where it's at. I reread it to my wife a couple days ago because I was just so struck by it. But he basically says that we constantly think that that businesses decline because of their complacency, right? Oh, they're not innovative enough.
Yep.
They're too complacent. They're lazy. But he says it's actually quite the opposite. It's that they overextend themselves.
Mhm.
And so what he goes into is Packer's law. I think that's what he goes into is
Page
Packer's law.
55.
Page 55.
And he talks about how, like, the way I interpreted it is, and I posted on this on LinkedIn a few days ago, but like move at the speed of the right person, right?
Mhm.
Move at the speed of having the right people in the right place. Instead of thinking that next gadget or that next office or that next whatever it is going to be the next big thing for you, like build through people first and foremost. And that's how you're going to be, avoiding this stage 2 decline.
So he says, there's a great quote. It says, a great company is more likely to die of indigestion from too much opportunity than starvation from too little. So in here, he says more wealth, more fame, more power at the expense of long-term success is undisciplined. To compromise your values or lose sight of your core purpose in pursuit of growth and expansion is undisciplined. So that is where it comes back to be careful where you tell your team to focus, right? Really methodically think that out. When you're in these meetings, I love Kyle, we've really helped follow that model too, which is like, really, it's one thing every 90 days, but also it's taking a 90-day pause before adding anything. Like, let's just see how this works.
Mm-hmm.
Because Rubbermaid, they made one product, a new product every day for 1,000 days.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's not innovation, and we're not telling you to keep your feet in the sand or in the cement, as many of us like to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it is surrounding yourself with really good people that want to also grow and learn.
Yep. I like that, because I've been challenged too, and Chris challenged me as well with what's a measurable for culture, and my initial gut response is that definitely isn't happiness, because you can be happy and quickly go bankrupt. But what I liked was on page 57, when he talks about the right people, he said every person in a key seat should be able to respond to the question, what do you do? Not with a job title, but with a statement of personal responsibility. And I pulled in a little bit of EOS because we're doing that in my office this year. But what's your measurable with it? What's the one number that you own, right? So your front desk person, it's not I welcome everybody and I, say hi and I make sure they have coffee. That's not a measurable, right? I make sure the schedule is 90% full, or our no-show rate is X. But everybody has to have that because then you have a job. You know what you're doing. Think of sports. The lineman never will score a touchdown, but he knows my job is to block the big dude that's in front of me, and I'm successful if that big dude never touches the quarterback. So what is
and
that
if you
one
think of
role?
it that way, Aaron, that kind of hit a chord where it's like you haven't in a private practice where you have 4 lanes or 6 lanes or whatever, and you have 7 to 12 to 15 employees. This management, this middle quote unquote management that we have is bullshit, right? So you're looking for, again, what Aaron reflecting on that are accepting responsibility and making it happen. You don't have room for this middle layer of management.
No.
And I think that's where, getting back to those core values, we all probably have somebody in our office that's not cutting it. And we're just like, it's just a warm body right now.
Mm-hmm.
But that's your culture thing. So it's a disease of mediocrity, is what he says in the book.
Yep. And it's a pretty easy disease to address because it just takes communication. And it takes communication and then accountability. And I don't know a single sports team that doesn't try to win professionally. Nobody goes out to have fun. We got past that in grade school. Right? Middle school and high school sports were for fun, but you look to play to win. And I think business is the same way. And I think that as an athlete on those teams, you appreciated a coach that pushed you. As an employee in my office, I want to find the right people that appreciate getting pushed so they can get better and take on new challenges. But they don't know that unless I'm communicating with them and give them the freedom to own whatever role they have.
Shall we move to stage 3?
We shall, but I kind of want to. Can I skip stage 3 and go to stage 4? Not skip it indefinitely, but your word mediocrity just made me think of one of the lines in there that I just absolutely love, and it's in stage 4. So we'll go back to stage 3. So sorry, listener. Stage 4.
I like
Stage 3 is
exciting.
denial of risk and peril. Stage 4 is grasping for salvation. So this is another one of those lines that I read to my wife Lauren. So let's see, page 92.
When you read to her, Kyle?
No, she doesn't really care, to be honest with you. She's like, yeah, cool, that's great, Kyle, thanks.
I'm glad you have your
which
friends.
which is great. Honestly, it's great for me because I would get way too full of myself. I would be stuck in hubris if I had somebody that would just cheerleaded me all the time. So all right, 92. Stage 4, grasping. Stage 4 grasping can produce a brief improvement, but the results do not last. So stage 4 is basically grasping. It's what is it called again? Grasping for salvation. Dashed hope follows dashed hope follows dashed hope yet again. Companies stuck in stage 4 try all sorts of new programs, new fads, new strategies, new visions, new cultures, new values, new breakthroughs, new acquisitions, and new saviors. And this is the good part. When one silver bullet fails, they search for another and then yet another. The signature, and this is going to your mediocrity word, the signature of mediocrity is not an unwillingness to change. The signature of mediocrity is chronic inconsistency. Oof.
Yep. If that doesn't describe the graveyard of, equipment purchases that sit in a storage unit that somebody's paying for on a monthly basis, I don't know what does.
That is exactly right. Yep. Chronic inconsistency.
And what I listened to too, you have Tony Robbins, Dan Martell, what they say too is success is about consistency. And we've read enough of these books to see that that's really what success is day in, day out. The day I had yesterday, oh my God, I was about to scream. both pieces of my equipment didn't turn on. My slit lamp was broken. I had one of my major techs was out. We had a full book of patients. I had my son with me, so I was like all over with the mom. Patients were asking for their prescription. It was just like one of those days where you're just not in that flow state. And a lot of the times we'll make decisions off of days like that versus a day that went really, really smooth. But it does leverage the consistency that you need to have and that discipline that you need to have. So going back to like atomic habits, I constantly am talking to patients, can you walk for 11 minutes? Like you want to change your blood sugar, you want to change your diabetes, but you don't even know your number. Did your doctor talk about you just walking 11 minutes a day? So those little changes, and they look at you dumbfounded because no one has taken the 5 seconds to say that to them.
Yep. And that's exactly what, so I highlighted the same paragraph you did, Kyle, but I merged two
Isn't
sentences.
it highlighted in the book?
It is highlighted, but I highlighted the highlight.
Look at that.
Okay.
And I actually, so I've got a new Book Nerds hack. Because this book has been out and I couldn't find a new copy, I bought a used copy off Amazon that was pre-highlighted for me. So it took me back to my college days when you bought books and you wanted to use one. So I knew what somebody else had already highlighted. But the last line in that in the paragraph that you had written or read, Kyle, was the signature of mediocrity is chronic inconsistency. And then if you turn the page to 92, the top of it, it says, greatness requires a series of intelligent, well-executed actions that add up one on top of the other. And so it took that, hey, here's the inconsistency and here's the antidote to the inconsistency.
Love
Right?
it.
So I'm not against by any means buying new toys for the practice. Lord knows we have a bunch. But if there's not a baby step methodical way of bringing it in successfully, it's not going to be successful. Your patients are going to suffer from it. The company's going to get a bad rap because you're going to say, I brought in XYZ and it didn't work, when it wasn't XYZ's fault. It was your fault or my fault. But it's that methodical, just go at the speed of people, go at the speed of success and what you can implement. Makes a much bigger deal. And it's not fun walking that slow.
No.
But over time, you're going to be way further ahead. It's the old tortoise and the hare that we learned as kids and still clearly never learned.
So fear comes into this. I have a question for both of you. Are you more fearful of failure, or are you more fearful of being in the same place that you are a year from now?
Ooh, I don't know.
If you asked me that a couple of years ago, I'd answer differently than I do today.
What would have been like? Look at it. Let's reflect, because that's
Well,
maybe
so I
where
would've-
some
I
of our
would've been-
listeners are.
I would have been much more afraid of what I look like to others, so appearing as a failure, and not being able to show that I'm in a different place that I was previously, which I think both are the same thing. It would have been a fear of the ego and how others turned at me. I'm really not afraid of either one, mostly because I know that I've got the work ethic to try new things and fail and keep coming back. And so
really it's the trust you've worked on and your limiting beliefs to know
Yes.
that you've got this no matter what's thrown at you.
that I've got this, and that the team who's along with me, truly along with me, not showing up for a paycheck, but truly along with me. My biggest fear is letting them down. And because they've bought into the culture and the idea. I have no problems firing somebody if they're here for a job, but it's letting down the ones who have bought into what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build. But I also really don't fear that too much, because we've built a cadence that has shown that it's successful by challenging ourselves, by asking questions, by having fierce open dialogue where we can debate and they can tell me that I'm stupid and I'm wrong, and we can talk through it.
Yeah, that's good. I would say, I'm not so fearful of failure. I think it's the latter. You said scared of if you're in the same spot a year from now. right? I would fear that more, which is weird because what is wrong with now? You know what I mean? Like, why would
I kind of like you
not
today, Kyle.
not to get so like existential or anything, but to get into the psychology of that, but like what is wrong with where my practices are now? What is wrong with where the consulting stuff with iCode stuff is? Like, it's a great spot. I'm having fun doing it. Um, but I guess my expectation is always to just see continuous improvement or growth. And I think if I didn't have that and look back, uh, honestly, I'd probably be okay. If I look back and didn't, it would be fine. But me looking like projecting forward is like, ugh, I don't know if I could do that. You know, I don't know. I don't know what that says, but
Well, I think part of so there has to be growth in being where you're at now. So
yeah.
if I mean with you've got to generate another 3 to 5% of revenue because
Yeah.
costs of going up. So to stay where you're at, there's still growth inherent
Hmm.
in there. Um, I think that just maybe I'm the only one that needs to say that out loud, but you know
Yeah,
there has to
No,
be growth to
yeah,
stay
I think that's
stable,
great
right? You
because this is what
can't
for
it's
sure.
about.
you can't just pause because then you're going
Hmm.
backwards, and
Yeah.
that's worse than you are this year. So
Hmm.
it does take effort. It does take energy to stay where you're at.
So he
I
talks in
think,
this chapter about the overnight successes, which again is what we see all over LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram are the success theaters, but it's not showing the hard days. And he said most overnight success stories are about 20 years in the making. And so when they bring in stage 4, they typically bring out or bring in a new CEO. And so one thing to realize here is wherever you are in your career, could someone step in behind you and fill your shoes and know what to do? So why Rome fell was because he didn't have a proper successor. And so I think what one of my most proudest moments here is I saw this with my dad's business. My dad, beautiful woodworker, him and my mom built furniture, sold it for years and since I was, before I was even born. And then just one day it shut down and all that knowledge was just gone, right? The whole the shop, just to see it sold off piece by piece, because he didn't see, this was him too, like micromanaging over really being the leader. Again, taught whatever, but these are lessons that you learn, and that's what he always tells me. And he's like, you're not a micromanager. You do put a lot of trust in your people. There's checks and balances to do it. But then with Dr. Garmizo's practice, he found a successor. He let me come in and be me. He let me fail. He didn't just say, we do this because it's the way that it's done. He's like, you pick which EMR we're going on. I don't care. I'm not doing it. That's why you're here. And the trust that you can build in someone around you is really critical. So when you see what's happening in PE and all of these entities, realize there's people behind you that will pay for that. That your last 2 to 5 years are a critical piece to this.
mhm.
Those are your money making years, like those snowball years. If you're a brand new grad, guys, it takes you 5 years to pay for your salary. And then you start to see these snowball effects. So when they brought in these people, they got back to basics. And I think that's what my biggest takeaway from this was. Your phone rings because patients want to see you.
Mhm.
Go through the process yourself. You can hire a coach. You can hire a consultant to come in and punch you in the face. My 8-year-old calls them insultants. He's like, Mommy, are you an insultant? I was like, yes, I am, Dalton. But when was the last time you called your office, made an appointment, did your own online forms, parked in your front parking lot, walked in, checked in, got the paperwork that's been copied 5 times, sat there in the waiting room until you were called, went through all of your pre-testing to see what they did, saw yourself, like if you need to see yourself, or the other doctor there if you have one,
Yep.
and then go through your checkout. What was the handoff? How was the experience in your optical? What was the checkout? Then when you left, how long were you there? And then what did the review process look like? When was the last time you actually did that?
Huge.
It's huge, and I think you just covered summarized a lot of uh, denial of risk and peril, right? Because we think
Yeah,
everything is going smooth,
it's going
everything is
fine.
going great. My
It's
patients
fine.
love me because I can name the 3 people that said this was the best exam they've ever had,
Yeah.
right? But you ignored the 97 others who you were just another checkoff on their to-do list for the year, and because you don't know the process, and you're in that state of head in the sand, or everything's great, I don't need to worry about it, or my patients love me, they love that I spend an hour with each of them, which by the way was interesting because I took a bunch of different reviews from practices in San Diego, and I put them through chat just to say, hey, tell me what positive people are saying. And speed, how fast the exam was one of the top positive comments.
Wow.
They want in, they want out.
They want in, they want out. They don't want to talk about kids and dogs. A handful do, but the
Yep.
vast majority don't, which was really interesting. And maybe your area of the world is different, but I think it's that just so it's not the the cash flow risks, but it's also the what experience am I giving to my patients, and customers, because they are spending their time and dollars with us, even if they're healthcare dollars, right? What experience are we giving them, and am I changing enough, and am I growing enough to continue giving them what they need?
Well, that goes right back to stage 3. You want to hop back there.
That's where we're just jumping
Yeah.
back to, is that and I think it's important that we look at the business numbers. So they talked about cash
Mhm.
flow and ratio and debt to equity stuff, which some of us find super fun and sexy and others hate. But it's the perceived value that we're giving as well, through the experience that we're sharing, not just with patients but with our staff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I think
stage 3. Go ahead, Kyle.
I think one of the quotes there on page 70 to kind of sum it up, stage 3, big bets without empirical validation or that fly in the face of mounting evidence can bring companies down unless they're blessed with unusual luck. And luck is not a reliable strategy.
So this comes
Dang it,
back
that
to the
was
very
bacon.
beginning when Aaron, you were talking about questions. Good questions. So this is, if you get the same answer, this is what I wrote down just after the chapter. If you get the same answer, ask a different question. So in here, he talked about the Challenger launch. They were asking the wrong question. And that's actually what led to the failure of the launch. And I remember actually writing a paper about Challenger. I think I was like in 6th grade. I don't remember when that exactly was. But can you prove that it's safe to launch was the question that it morphed into, or that actually was the question they should have been asking, versus they were trying to prove that it was unsafe to launch.
Right.
Yep.
So when we call back again to optometry, guys, our patients call us, they want us, but 1 in 3 patients are leaving.
Yep.
We are not asking the right question. We're not fixing, like, that's a very below the waterline, what he talks about, hole that you can't do more marketing to fill. You can't see more patients to fill that gap. So what would be better questions, like, if we could really think about it, like when a patient asks their PD, and this is where you like really have to think with your brain a little bit. And I want to go to chat to do this, because even when you go to chat, let's talk about AI for just 1 second. There was a study recently done where college students were broken into 2 groups. One group had to write the paper by themselves. They could put it through chat and then go edit it. And the other group could start with a prompt in chat, and then they edited what chat gave them. The group that did the work, that did the thinking, that did the cognitive hard questions and got to the answers themselves, felt proud, they were positive, and they felt purposeful. And they remembered what they wrote. The other group lost their purpose, couldn't remember what they wrote, and felt absolutely defeated, which is why did I even do this? What would be some questions we could ask on why?
Like the first question is to ask why. Somebody comes in and says, I want my PD. Well, why? Because I need it to buy my glasses online. Cool. So I would love to understand what's attractive about the online. And I think the hardest part there is to get away from the defensive
Yes.
and taking
Yes.
offense to it and just understanding the why. Because quite frankly, maybe they have a style that's you don't know until you ask, and then we surmise. And maybe they were recommended by a friend, right? Maybe they got a free coupon to try a free pair of glasses from there, right? Maybe they really are hurting cash flow wise, and all they can spend is $49 on a pair of glasses, and they're too afraid to admit that out loud. There's a lot of different reasons why, and if we just jump directly into assuming, we don't know. And I think that there's a big difference when those questions come up, and this is where we need to train ourselves and train our teams, is between being empathetic and helping to understand the why so that we can do better versus trying to almost come across as defensive or combative and put the blame on the individual.
Right.
And so there's 101 different reasons why somebody might be asking for their PD. But how you address it is, and I don't think there's one right answer, but I think that every office and every practice should have their answer and their flow, and then go back and analyze, right? Write down your answers. Figure out if there's a way to improve it.
Yeah, I love that, Aaron. I wonder, what do you think the main assumption is across the board for most of us optometrists? Like, why don't we ask why? Why, what is the answer that we just assume everybody's going to say, but maybe not the reality? You think it's cost?
I think
That's what I hear a lot.
I think we default to cost.
We default to cost.
But like you're asking, is that really true about our patient base?
Yeah,
I mean, that'd be
I don't
interesting to
think
know.
that's true.
I don't think it is. I think
Nope.
people leave because of confusion is the number one.
Mhm.
Convenience. Like, guys,
Mhm.
when you're shipping lenses back to your practice, nobody wants to come back. When did someone really buy a pair of sunglasses when they came back to pick up their contacts?
Never.
Never.
Mhm.
So we're telling ourselves these little lies to make ourselves feel better. And I love that, Aaron, where you cannot get defensive in that moment. And it hurts. I'm not telling you it doesn't hurt. That's why I built this system here. I couldn't watch another one walk. But I was taking myself out of the game by not asking. So I think the critical piece here is to stay in the game.
Yes. And to help along that way, and Kyle, I
Page 123, never give in.
never give in.
Right
but
back, right back to it.
I'm going to jump back to page 77, right?
Okay,
And he's got
so-
a comparison of, and I think there's going to be an offline conversation with you, Chris, and I, and Brianna on.
Look, I got a
on
picture from my kiddo.
Oh, nice. Good job.
on measurables for team culture, but there's teams on the way down and teams on the way up.
Yeah, that's good.
And the first one here, teams on the way down, they shield those in power from grim facts, fearful of penalty and criticism for shining light on harsh realities. If I'm an optician and my capture rate is low and I had to give out a bunch of PDs, I don't want to go tell my boss that we didn't sell a bunch of stuff. We're on the teams on the way up, bring forth unpleasant facts. Hey, our capture rate is down. People are asking for X, Y, and Z, right? We need to discuss this because this part of our business is ugly right now. We may believe that we're the best place to buy eyeglasses. We may believe we're the best place to get contacts, but the reality isn't showing that that's what is being perceived by patients and customers. And then I think that if you can answer yes to each of those questions for on the teams on the way up, you've got some very difficult conversations, or rather uncomfortable conversations that you're going to be having, but you're going to improve on all these facts. Right? Because today it's I want to get my PD because Zenni or Warby online. Right? Tomorrow it's going to be an online eye exam. The day after that, who knows what's coming down the line. By the way, same thing happened to Dad when he was in practice because LASIK was going to kill it and the contacts were going to kill it. And I remember Grandpa being prouder than proud that he could look at a retina without having to dilate an eyeball. As silly as that sounds today, right? He was adamant that he was better than his ophthalmology friends because they had to use drops and he didn't need to, right? Which sounds silly, right? So what arguments are we making that sound silly because we're afraid to have these conversations?
Mm. Yeah, that's
So
good.
to sum this up in level 5, the one word for level 5 is cash.
Yep.
So you don't run out of cash. So I don't know about you, but again, living in South Florida with hurricanes and who knows what, I'm fortunate enough to, that's how we ran the business was, yeah, if that's your salary, whatever, like a certain amount always stays in that bank account regardless. That also, when you look at what happened with COVID, I was able to realize I had to take care of those people, not really realizing we were going to get paid to do that. But I didn't let those people go. We figured out different ways.
Yep.
So never, the one thing here, he says, never waste a crisis, but don't create crises that don't exist because that's where you lose trust.
Yep. I was talking with the president of, and I don't have his permission to say his name, so I won't, but president of one of the largest companies that in the industry. And we were going over some data, and he said, I'm looking at units sold. And I said, well, what about, percentages and this and that, how we look at it? And he looks at me and goes, Aaron, I can't pay bills with percentages. I can't pay bills with margins, with everything else. I pay bills with cash that I got from selling something. And so we're going to just talk about what it is that we're selling, because cash is king, and units for us directly equal cash, because I sold you something and you paid me for it. So that's how we're going to analyze it, period. And I said, that was very, very insightful from a international, huge global company. The president of it said, no, we're just going to go back to the basics because this is how I pay my bills. And this is how I run the company. This is what I'm responsible for. I hope you're doing the same thing in your office, because you can talk about your growth and you're up so much percent and this and that, but what does the cash in the bank tell you about how you're doing?
Yeah.
I love that.
So
Mic
here
drop.
it says, failure is not so much a physical state as a state of mind. Success is falling down and getting up one more time without end. And that's just what life is. And it feels like it's rushing. It feels like we're at this breakneck pace right now with all the AI and stuff. Guys, that's just programming. I heard another stat the other day. It said, it's not, we're humanizing it, but it's not really human yet. A kid will process 16,000 hours of visual information. You cannot teach a computer that. Something has to be programmed with 400,000 hours of all of these large language models. So don't, again, put your head in the sand when it talks to these things, but have these conversations of how it's going to continually improve. How are you, yes, that piece of equipment you bought that's got dust on it that you didn't implement, don't do that again.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean not to, like,
Learn
I
from
shouldn't
it.
say not do it again, but yeah, maybe there's better questions to ask yourself to then move yourself forward.
And one of my mentors, Mick, I remember when I bought the practice for my dad. I think you guys know Mick Kling. I called him and said, hey, I'm getting my ass kicked this month. Right? It was a bad month years ago. And Mick laughed and he said, Aaron, you're new to practice and new to ownership, so you're going to have good days and bad days. Soon you'll have good weeks, bad weeks. Then you'll have good months, bad months, and then quarters, and then years, and then you'll have good decades and bad decades, but really they're all going to be kind of good at that point, right? It goes up and down. And he knew I was a runner, and at the time I was racing Ironman still, and he's like, it's kind of like your runs. Like some runs you go out and they are the best thing ever. You didn't feel the run, you glided all the way through your 12 miles, and other runs, like it hurt every single step. And I laughed, said, yeah. And he's like, so does the bad run make the good run less valuable? Or does it mean that your next run's going to suck? And I go, no, actually, usually my best runs come right after a really bad one. And he goes, yeah, business is the same way. It's like, just take the good and the bad and just keep showing up, lacing your shoes up and doing it again, but learn. If you didn't eat properly, well, don't eat a Big Mac before you go running, or if you forgot to eat, don't try that again, because then you're going to run out of energy. just take the little lessons and apply it. So I thought that was very helpful.
It's a great summary too. Like you said it, and I was thinking it was a lot of it is just keep showing up. Like you go back to the chronic inconsistency, another one of the concepts that listeners can look up from Jim Collins. If you go to jimcollins.com, all of his concepts are on there online. You can read from them, but one of them is the 20-mile march. Which is essentially just this idea of no matter what, we're going to go this distance today. Even if it's the perfect weather or the worst weather, we're going to go this distance every day. We're going to march this much. So it's just that idea of like being consistent, showing up every single day, and enduring through it all. So yeah, like I said before, I love this book. Fantastic. I'll be revisiting it a lot.
Yeah, and if your purpose gets shifted too, that's okay. Like your purpose, your beliefs are allowed to evolve, they're allowed to change. And I think too, Jim Collins in the podcast that you guys sent he has a big life question that he's trying to answer. And I've gotten actually pretty clear on mine. And it takes time for that to evolve and giving yourself the ability and the time to do that.
And the permission and
So
the freedom to do it.
What's one? I have a challenge for you all. I would love to challenge the listeners too. Is go to the concepts page. We talked about flywheel. We mentioned that, but we didn't explain it at all. Let's not explain it. Let's just have people read about it. There is a small book about it. It's a little monograph, and I have that. It's excellent. But go to the concepts page, read about it, and one challenge to you both, and then and we can challenge this to everybody else that's listening and on LinkedIn there is, what is your own personal flywheel? Like create your own personal flywheel. And we can share that. Let's share that online on LinkedIn, whether it's just put it on a napkin or on a piece of paper, drawing it out. But what does that look like for your own life? Because we have our primary, and your primary flywheel may not be like your practice. It may be like for me, I think there's a flywheel for each of my locations, and then for the consulting work I do. But there's also like the flywheel of Kyle Clutie. Like, what areas of effort do I constantly have to have input in to continue the momentum of work, of being successful?
Yeah.
What makes you?
I love that.
Yeah, be fun to do, fun to see.
That would be.
And one last thing before we follow up, we do have a WhatsApp group, so you can request to join that with the book nerds. We are going to do the 21-day Essentialism Challenge again. So it was a kit. We're going to start July 1st. And believe me, 21 days goes really fast, but it also helps you slow down when you are conscious about what you're doing, which I think that's what this is about. So thanks everybody for listening. Our next book,
some sort of sales book, right? Which one?
Throw it out. Which one? Make a decision now.
Do you have it?
I like the one, Aaron, you came up with.
Daniel Pink's To Sell Is Human.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
It's a good summer read.
Sounds good.
Yep.
To Sell Is Human.
To
Join us
Sell Is
next
Human,
time.
Daniel Pink. So we will we'll put all those links in the show notes to this. Look forward to there's Kyle and his fireworks. I got to tell you guys, I look forward to this every month. So you're the best. So cool. We will see you next month. Thank you again for joining us, and have a fantastic summer.
Thanks, everybody.